Welcome back to What You Will Learn. My name is Adam Ashton.
And my name is Adam Jones. Today we are reviewing Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark, Being Human in the Age of Artificial Intelligence.
Artificial intelligence is something that's certainly, it's here, mate, and it's only coming stronger. So it's something that this book goes into, what is it? Should we be afraid, or is it going to be a good thing? And sort of weighs up all the different things that people think about AI.
It's an important thing, whatever industry you're in. If you look at the horizon of decades and decades, this might have one of the biggest impacts on your job and your career in life. So I think there's a huge utility in understanding what is coming around the corner with artificial intelligence. He says he's not sure if AI is going to go and run the world, but he says one thing for sure is we can't say for certain that it's not going to do that. So this is what he does in the book. He explores this question of what are the possibilities with AI.
Yeah, at the very start of the book, he says, here's why I wrote the book. There's a whole bunch of questions that he wanted to ask and conversations that he wanted to kick off. Things like, what would it be like if your job was automated? What sort of future do you want? What career advice should we give our kids? Will we control intelligent machines, or will they control us? And basically, will robots replace us? Will they merge with us? Will we coexist? So these are all the types of questions he talks about and conversations that we should be thinking and talking about more.
Some of the real mainstream beliefs about AI are completely myth, he says. Something like superintelligence by 2100 is inevitable. And that's bullshit. The fact is, it may happen in decades, it may happen in centuries, or it might never happen at all. So this might just be purely speculation that doesn't be fulfilled.
Yeah, another myth is that AI is going to be evil and it's going to take over the world and get rid of all the humans. It's probably something to consider. But he says that we've got to shift from that scare tactic and rather think about, okay, what sort of goals should we implant within AI to make sure that that doesn't happen?
One myth is robots are the concern, but the fact is that misaligned intelligence is the main concern. So it needs no body, only an internet connection, right? So someone's algorithm could just be sitting as a file on your computer and it actually has no physical form whatsoever.
Yeah, another myth is that AI could never control humans. We act out of free will. But he says a fact is really looking at it like we can control our pets because we're smarter than them. So he says that perhaps if AI becomes smarter than us, it might be able to control us in some way.
There's some of the myths and some of the actual facts that he does to really start the book. He says this is actually the most important conversation of our time.
It's a big one, man. Because there's been a lot of developments in AI over the last couple of decades, and as we know, with technology and the rate of change increasing, those big changes are going to be happening quicker and quicker, and it's probably closer than we think, and perhaps closer than we can keep up with.
If you look at how life actually evolved in the cosmos, right? Like with us, because we're conscious, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And this isn't in the laws of physics, this perception of beauty and so forth. But before the universe actually awoke and had consciousness like we have right now, there actually was no beauty. So this makes our cosmic awakening more astonishing and worth celebrating, our consciousness. So our consciousness really evolved to become more complex through 3 different tiers over time.
Yeah, so Life 1.0 was the first stage. So that's just simple biological stuff. So it can survive, it can replicate, but it can't really do much more than that. So that's Life 1.0. It's hardware and it's software are already predetermined by DNA, and it changes with evolution, but it doesn't do anything to change itself.
So yeah, evolution obviously takes millions of years to actually evolve into whatever the next thing is. Now, Life 2.0 is cultural. So this is the second stage, and this is where you can survive and replicate, and you can design your own software, but you can't design your own hardware. So when he says we can design our own software, this is where we're at now. We can change our thoughts and our goals and our beliefs, which is our software, quite quickly. Microbes on the ground, the algae, they can't really change their software and their attitudes at all. So we're at this second tier at the moment.
Yeah, he talks about that our software, as you say, mate, being like our thoughts and our knowledge as well. So like things like, say, if you think I want to learn a new skill, you can go out there, spend the time and the energy and the effort to acquire that new skill, which is like a software upgrade. But we can't upgrade our hardware because that's Life 3.0. That's the technological life where they can change their hardware and their software.
So this is the point where artificial intelligence, it's so smart, it's redesigning itself. So it's hardware to be actually become more and more powerful. So this is actually where the intelligence explosion happens. So, right now, as humans, we can't redesign our bodies to become 100 times X tomorrow and 100 times X that the next day and so forth. So this is where the AI can do that to really explode into places we can't even conceive of right now.
Yeah, and that's sort of the crazy thing. Like, if we look at humans, like we're currently at Life 2.0, to move to 3.0 would be like maybe we could redesign our hardware we're sort of doing it in small ways, like maybe knee reconstructions and stuff, but we're talking about bigger, larger scale things. And in terms of the computers or robots or whatever we want to call this AI, they can also upgrade their own software. Like at the moment, we've got a computer, it does what it does, it's pre-programmed, that's what it does. Artificial intelligence is sort of getting to the point where the software thinks, I want to learn a new skill, and then it goes out and it learns that new skill to upgrade its software. So that's obviously, once it is able to upgrade itself, that's when it's starting to take over.
Oh, 100%. This is where he speculates that, what he calls artificial general intelligence might happen this century. And this is when a system can apply itself to a wide variety of topics, more like a human brain, instead of having narrow expertise, such as only being good at chess or Jeopardy. So a lot of the AI today, you got your Google photos, we can recognize photos, but that's a very narrow one, AI. And you got one that can play chess, only chess. But the idea of general intelligence is where you can apply the same eye across fields and across disciplines or whatever, and then it quickly takes over all humans. And it might, it might learn things from one area and apply it to the next area that it goes into. And that's where really all the wild shit happens. Yeah. It goes outside of what we can understand right now.
Yeah, and that's why this book and these ideas are so important to think about for the two reasons of urgency and impact. So obviously impact could be massive if some of the either the doomsdayers are wrong or some of the most optimistic people are right, whereas it could be a massive, massive, massive impact in one way or the other. The other thing is urgency, in that it's not something way, way, way off into the distance that we don't really need to worry about. It's coming soon enough that it's super important to be talking about and thinking about right now.
One popular one at the moment is obviously climate change, which we've got every reason to be doing what we can to stop that. But that's, in some estimates, it's a 50 to 200 year horizon. AI going off to the point where we can't control it, it might be in a smaller horizon.
Yeah, if we think of like things like, say, wars, terrorism, unemployment, poverty, immigration, all these things are very, very important and very urgent. Obviously, we're talking about them now, but AI could have a way bigger impact than all of those combined if, some of these most extreme scenarios come to bear.
So he explores a little bit more about intelligence in the next chapter. He's got a quote here by Edward Harrison. Hydrogen, given enough time, turns into people. Which is actually true, man. The whole universe at the start was hydrogen, and then through the laws of physics, everything just evolved, and then turned into people. So I guess implicit in that quote is saying we're at this point now of people. It's still evolving in some direction. I mean, the difference between hydrogen and people is huge. There's no reason the difference between people and another thing, perhaps AGI, is possible as well. It's something we can't conceive of.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a few things that you talked about earlier that we'll just quickly recap is the narrow versus the broad intelligence. So the narrow is that, the computer's designed to do something very, very specific. That's what it does. Whereas the broad is where it can take on a much wider range of things. Like, say, the calculator. The calculators are some form of artificial intelligence, and calculators were way, way, way better than humans a long time ago at doing that one very specific task of, numerical arithmetic. But a calculator can't then go and take over other human tasks.
Yeah, exactly. So although a pocket calculator can kick your ass at arithmetic, it will never improve its speed or accuracy based on what it's done previously. And, that's the big one. So this is where the big difference is, like today. And it's this ability to learn that is the most fascinating aspect of general intelligence. So it's a thing where whatever you program or whatever you make, it improves and improves and improves ad infinitum.
Yeah, that machine learning, like say Google's a big one where every time we're searching, it's learning based on what we searched for and what we clicked. It's making those, realizing what it should be actually giving you on the search. So that's sort of, what you're searching for, what you click on. It's learning each time and improving itself each time.
And because of this, we've had some really big holy shit moments, right? So if you think about chess, it's a game of computation. So you can actually pre-program a chess computer that doesn't need to learn anymore. There's there's a limited amount of spaces it can go. So it's not beyond the realms of just incredible programming to make an incredible chess AI.
Yeah, and chess computers knocked off humans about 20 years ago, I think, where the best chess computer beat the best human in the world. And right now, there's no chance you could ever beat the top-notch chess computer. They've gone beyond us, and that's it.
No way, man. Absolutely. So in those 2 decades, people thought, all right, it beat chess, but what about the realms of creativity and strategy and intuition? These are deeply human. The idea that AI can come into these spaces is just not going to happen, or it's centuries away, or not in our lifetime. But this is why the idea of Alphago, that Alphago beat the world-leading Go player, was such a big thing, because Go is understood as being deeply intuitive and deeply creative and deeply strategic. So something that's in the area of human skill.
Yeah, I don't really know too much about Go, but apparently it's a 19 by 19 board, and somehow there's more potential Go positions than there are atoms in the universe. So that's a hell of a lot of things. So it's something you could never say to a computer, here's all the different possibilities and all the different scenarios. Do your quick calculations, work out what's the best move. That's why the humans thought, they could never learn Go, because there's all these human traits like intuition and creativity that are required to be good at Go. And then AlphaGo came along and beat the world's best Go player with some wild, fucked up creative moves.
So it's not just that it beats the world's best Go player, it's how it actually did it. So it learned from previous games of humans playing Go, and what it came up with was something completely out of the ordinary. So in Go, the way it goes is something like most humans would go 2 moves forward, or 3 moves forward, and then that's, in our paradigm, people don't go beyond that. It's too risky. But this was one of the first times in history that that AlphaGo actually employed a tactic that's never been seen before in games. It actually went 5 moves forward, which is completely out of our paradigm. And this is how it threw the world's Go champion, and then it kicked its ass.
So firstly, it won chess, where there's only a certain number of combinations, and you could really program all the different possibilities, and it can look at what's the optimal scenario. Whereas Go, you couldn't program it, so it sort of had to learn and use these previously held human traits of intuition and creativity. There's another example of this old school Atari game called Breakout, which you probably played some kind of version of before. I played a game called DX Ball when I was in grade 8, so it was a similar sort of thing, where it's like sort of like a one-player Pong game where the ball bounces up, hits the brick goes away, you get a point, it comes back down, you got to move your little bouncer across to make sure it doesn't fall below. It's sort of hard to visually represent it, but hopefully people get what we're saying. So one way to do it is you got to knock off all the bricks. So one way to do it is just to keep going along and making it hit the brick, go and make sure your ball doesn't drop, bounce it up again, hit the next brick. But so that's what all it was programmed to do. And then the computer was able to learn the best way of doing it that required the least effort. So rather than keep chasing that ball around, it found that if it kept getting it on one side and it could knock off, rather than just the first layer, if it could knock off like a column's worth, it could then bounce the ball up through the gap, up to the top, and it would bounce off the roof and onto the top layer and keep bouncing around back and forth, rather than trying to chase its tail and keep getting off the bottom layer every time.
Yeah, it wouldn't even have to do anything there, would it?
Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't something that was programmed into it, but it worked out. It was able to learn that this is the most optimal route, is to get a little gap, get the ball through the gap up to the top so it can keep just bouncing around and it doesn't have to do anything.
So if you look at how creative this deep learning was in these real narrow fields, I mean, if you just got to think, if they applied that into whatever industry you're in certain ways, what kind of outcomes could come of it. I mean, I'm an engineer. If you applied this to engineering design or architecture and so forth, it could come up quite quickly with designs that we've never even thought of, and a much more simple and more efficient way of doing things. So, if they apply this AI to a whole different areas and industries, you can really see where this automation can come from, and why there's this fear and all this talk about, a jobless future.
Yeah, he goes through a lot of specific examples of different industries where AI could and, in fact, is taking over. Like, say, transportation. Elon Musk, is making self-driving cars, and the future is probably that cars are probably better than humans at driving, because they're not going to get distracted. They're going to follow a strict set of rules, and they're going to assess the environment around them and act accordingly. They're not going to be checking their phone. They're not going to be drunk. All these things where humans are inferior to cars, self-driving cars.
If you think about healthcare, if you digitize all your medical reports to help doctors make fast decisions, and then the AI might be scanning and comparing your medical records with all the other patients who got similar things to you to make predictions about where your illness might be. I mean, that's another huge area of potential.
Yeah, it's all these things that, pattern recognition is the first thing that AI is taking over, and even like things like the legal profession where the computer can much faster compare all of the previous cases and come up with a judgment that, if a human's probably only got access to 1% of all of the different cases from around the world, the computer can access all of them, pattern recognize to work out what did they do in the past, and so what should they use as precedent for the judgment for this one.
The education of the 20th century really set you up to be, all set for these kind of industries, but they're getting exploited by AI. So he also has some career advice for kids today.
Yeah, it's something that we need to consider. So realizing that in the future, by the time kids today are entering the workforce, it's going to look very different. And so you've got to be thinking, or at least asking these sorts of questions, what sort of social intelligence will people need in order to interact with machines? What sort of creativity do they need? How are they going to be able to come up with clever solutions to problems? What sort of things are they going to be required to do that they aren't, if machines take over certain aspects or certain tasks, what are the things left for humans to do? And hence they're the things that kids should be focused on learning at the moment.
He says you're pretty cooked if you're doing highly repetitive or structured actions in a predictable setting. You're not going to last very long and you're just going to get automated away.
So he says that some of the safe types of things are generally the ones that involve human-to-human interaction. Things like being a teacher or being a nurse or being a hairdresser or a masseuse, things like that, where I can't imagine having a couple of robot claws in your back would be a great massage.
Don't know, man, maybe.
Maybe. They'll work it out eventually.
There's some interesting robots. I heard about the first robot brothel in Texas.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
You heard about that one, right?
Yeah.
So they can do that.
Yet, but yeah.
If they can do that, I'm sure they can give a massage.
Yeah, eventually. No.
So, and you also asked the question, will humans eventually become unemployable? So one of the reasons people think there will be jobs is, the AI will just create new jobs. But in reality, the whole population aren't going to just start crowding to become software developers. Software developers only take up 1% of the whole US job market, and it's probably not going to take up a whole lot more.
Yeah, he had a pie chart of all the different sort of jobs in America. And one of the biggest ones, in fact, the biggest, was like drivers, truck drivers, delivery drivers. And if cars and AI, self-driving cars, are going to be better than humans, obviously those drivers are going to be no longer required. That's a big chunk of people, like a couple of percent of the population. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're doing is we're actually, there's not necessarily new jobs being created. We're actually just overcrowding some areas of the job market. And obviously, there's going to be a lot more demand for jobs and less supply. So obviously that's not good for your salaries. And this might be playing out in the world right now if no job wage growth, which is happening, I think, in most developed countries at the moment.
Yeah, and it ties into a lot of the questions pondered in Yuval Noah Harari's 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, a book we did a couple of months ago. Things like, what happens if people become useless or when people lose their jobs? Can we give people income without jobs? Should there be a universal basic income? What happens to the people who are left with nothing to do because, computers have taken over their job? They're all sort of questions without answers right now, but they're questions that we certainly need to be considering.
Yeah, like in that book, Yuval Noah Harari, on a similar note to Tegmark here, he talked about how humans have got two different skills. We've got cognitive skills and we've got also physical skills. And then in the third industrial revolution, there was a big land take of all the physical skills because we had new tractors and so forth to be able to do it much better than humans. And then new jobs were created around the cognitive area and so forth because that's the one skill we always had over the robots back then. But right now what this AI is doing is moving into the cognitive area. So being we've only got those two skills, robots and computers and so forth have already been proven to be better in physical. After cognitive, we're really not left with a hell of a lot. And we might be left in a place of just irrelevance in the workforce.
Not a good place to be.
He talks about the useless class. Don't want to be that.
Yeah, and so that's one big consideration is what happens to all those people. Another big consideration with the AI in particular is the idea of goals. So if we're going to have this sort of human level intelligence, this artificial general intelligence, a computer that can learn things and go out and keep improving itself, we need to somehow program it with specific goals. Like say for humans, we've got the physical goal of reproduction. And a lot of our activity and our behavior is centered around that ultimate goal of reproduction. So we need to think, what sort of goals are we giving this AI and how will that play out?
And the big one around that, like whose goals? Like we've got different values, different cultures have got different values. If China, for example, they're the first to develop the first AI, they've got completely different values to say what the US and Australia have and so forth in a lot of ways. And he also asks, can we ensure these goals are contained as the AI gets smarter? I mean, it might just run away and go new goals.
Yeah, like if we give it a goal, but then it gets smarter than us and decides to make up its own goal, what happens then?
Yeah, and can we change the goals of the AI once it's that smart? So these are all the kind of questions we need to ponder now and really have contingency plans for.
Yeah, and I suppose there's a lot of science fiction and movies and stuff around the idea of building robots, and we give it a specific goal, and then what happens? How does that play out? Like as we said, we've got the overarching goal as humans of reproduction, but then that manifests into sub-goals in order to achieve that. Like things like, say, we want to work hard to get a good job and make lots of money and get a promotion because that's going to make us more desirable to get a better mate, which is going to give us, better reproduction. It also then manifests into like the food we eat. Obviously, you can't starve to death or you won't be able to reproduce, so you've got to go and eat food in order to reproduce. So there's all these sub-goals that make up our eventual goal. And by giving an AI an overarching goal, it's going to be almost impossible to predict what sub-goals it will make up in order to achieve that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, as you said there, Life 1.0 was reproduction. What Life 2.0 does, it actually invents condoms.
Yeah.
So the original goal was to go out and reproduce, but all of a sudden Life 2.0 has condoms. There's no way Life 0.0 could have believed that, why the hell would it do that in the first place? So there's no reason to believe that Life 3.0, which is that next level beyond us, that might just turn its back on us completely by sub-goals. So the big risk with artificial general intelligence isn't really malice and being an asshole, but it might be extremely, extremely confident at its goals. And if these goals aren't aligned with ours, then we're in a lot of trouble. I mean, it's like the idea with us being humans right now. We don't think twice about flooding anthills when we're building hydroelectric dams. We don't give a fuck about the ants.
Yeah, that's true. Like, or say if we're chopping down forests, we don't think about the other lesser beings. You could say that are obviously some people wouldn't say that, but the lesser beings, that,
risky water there, mate.
Yeah, that are they're living in the forest. That's their environment. That's their habitat, and we don't think about it because we're just pursuing our own goals. So we just say, what if AI's got their goals and they think, oh, these bloody lesser animals, these humans, they're just getting in the way. Let's flood a section of their habitat so we can get on with our own goals.
So in most goals that we set for the AI, there's a few sub-goals that are most likely to pop up. So things like self-preservation is going to be it has to be around to pursue its original goal. It might be resource acquisition, so it's got more resources to complete that first goal. It might be curiosity to learn more about the world and expand its overall awareness, so in service of that first goal. So all these things, again, are just new things popping up that we didn't really put in there.
Yeah, especially that self-preservation one. If humans are so concerned about what this AI could eventually do, we might build in some kind of kill switch, some way to shut it down. But if the AI takes its own goal of self-preservation, which all humans have got, it might find a way to re-engineer that kill switch so that it can't be shut down by humans.
Yeah, absolutely. So that primary goal might be something like minimizing harm to humanity, right, as something that we want, which is something across cultures we all believe is a good thing. But all of a sudden it's creating more problems with its sub-goals that we didn't perceive at the first time. So all of a sudden now this is minimizing harm to humanity, but it's an AI that we can't control and we can't turn off anymore and we're just stuck with. So that's one area where the primary goal stays, but the sub-goals change into things and evolve into things that we couldn't really conceive of when we programmed it. Another thing that might happen, and he explains a completely new scenario with an analogy of ants. So imagine if a bunch of ants created you to be a recursively self-improving robot much smarter than the ants who shares their goals of building bigger anthills. Do you think you'll spend the rest of your days building bigger anthills if you're as smart as you are now? Or do you think you'll develop a taste for more sophisticated questions that the ants can't even comprehend? So this is an analogy for, say, if we develop the AI right now to have these like puny, pissy little goals, that once the AI is so smart, he'll just perceive our goals as almost irrelevant because it's so much more sophisticated than us beyond belief, and it'll just update its primary goals to something, again, completely different to what we imagined in the first place.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like if you take that analogy of an ant building a human to think, if we can build these anthills, but imagine if we had this robot that can go and build bigger anthills for us, that'd be amazing. But obviously, once you get to the human level and you think, well, building anthills is pretty useless. It might be like, we make self-driving cars to ship around us humans to make it easier so we don't have to drive and it's better. Eventually, if the AI gets so smart, they're going to be thinking, why the hell should I be driving you guys around? I've got much better things that I can think of that we couldn't even possibly perceive of right now.
That's it, man. Just the thought that an intelligence explosion can actually happen in our lifetime. The idea that the software redesigning its own hardware to redesign its software and so forth. And very quickly, it could get to the point where it's well beyond our imagination of how intelligent it could be.
A few, we haven't read a whole bunch of science fiction, but we've watched a couple of movies. I reckon there's some sick things that people are considering. And it's important, I suppose, that science fiction is showing us these things, like, say, the book and later the movie I, Robot. So they programmed a robot with 3 specific goals, and the rest of that movie is exploring, okay, within these 3 strict goals, how does the intelligence sort of interact, and how does it come up with different goals, and how does it weigh up the 3 different goals? Another sick one I loved was Ex Machina. Great movie, all about building like an android, a thing that looks like a human, feels like a human, and thinks like a human, and how does that interact with humans in the real world?
Yeah. No, I'll probably disagree in the regard for Ex Machina that they programmed it to be human. I think they programmed it to be super smart, where it was so smart it acted like it was human as a sub goal, as we were saying, actually to get out. So it didn't think like a human. It acted like it played on our emotions, acting like a human to get out, and that is a scenario that might pop up as well.
Yeah, another one is Black Mirror. Some pretty sick apps that really give it consider a few different ideas about what the future could be, and delve deep into some potential dystopian ways that might play out. But I think it's all interesting stuff to think about and consider, and it's slightly better than mindless TV.
Yeah,
like Vikings.
Vikings is amazing. So I absolutely I think this is probably where those Hollywood films are, and pure speculation is. It can actually happen in our lifetime, so it's very important. If an AI becomes competent in your industry, your whole job's going to change for sure. Our whole lives are changing year by year because of AI and so forth. So I think reading a book on and understanding a little bit more about AI is definitely worth the time. So if this book is kind of up your alley, use our link to go to Book Depository to buy it. We'll get a 5% cut, which we'll really appreciate. And just as a side note, if you ever want to buy a book, just click on any of the links in our show notes, because wherever you navigate from that link in Book Depository, we'll get the 5% cut on whatever you buy. So if you're doing it anyway, we'll really appreciate that.